This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We Made This.
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you've just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming.
Welcome to the Xcast. The truth is in here. I'll be your host today, Russ Hugo, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by Jim Beard. Hello again.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I must have done okay the last time. I wasn't banned from the show or anything.
No, and I think you're our resident Darren McGavin expert. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, crap! Now I have to live up to that, right?
The pressure's on.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've done me any favors by having me rewatch this episode, but we'll talk about that.
Definitely. So speaking of the episode, today we're going to be talking about Agua Mala, which was episode 13 of season 6. First aired February 21st, 1999. The director was Rob Bowman, and the writer was David Amen. Now, to kind of give a little bit of context on David Amen, because it probably hasn't been mentioned too many times, although it was recently mentioned on the episode that was just released to the Xcast that I actually haven't had a chance to finish listening to, which is Terms of Endearment.
Right.
So he wrote that. It was his first episode before that. Then Agua Mala. Then he did Rush, Chimera, Invocation, Hellbound, and Release. So there's a real mix in there. There aren't any that I think people would call all in all classics, but something like Invocation and the rest, there's some charm to them. What are your thoughts on some of those other episodes?
You know, I'll be honest. There's nothing that's springing out in my head right now. I know I haven't watched any of those, recently, but just going through those titles, there's absolutely nothing that's jumping out at me to speak to it. I hope he got better than this one, but I can't dredge it up right now.
Yeah, we may have to wait for the Xcast to explore those ones more down the road. In general, my impression of all of them is it's hard to, I don't think of them as being bad, and I don't think of them as being classics, which I think kind of sums up pretty much where I sit with Agua Mala. So we'll see, though. We'll see. IMDb gave it a score of 7.6. So that's fairly low. What would you give it on a scale of 1 to 10?
Wow. Literally, I'm going to go right in the middle of that. I'm just going to say 5 or 6 at the very most. I can kind of sum this one up in one word, and that's filler. I walked away from it, rewatching it, in fact, just a little bit ago, and that's the first thing I said was, wow, that was some filler.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing when you get this far into a TV show. On one hand, you're going to repeat yourself, potentially, but this one really does seem like a greatest hits episode.
Yeah.
In some ways, thematically, in the sense you've got the worm parasite from beyond time and the depths from ice. You've got a little bit of the host with again, being water-based. You have the parasite aspect that is flushed in through the drain and sewer system from out on the ocean. It's got the squishy aspects of Tomb and the rain from Rain King just a few episodes ago. I had to throw that in. I apologize. And then Dode Calm, just the fact that the whole solution to that plot line was the clean water versus, the sailing. Yeah. There was a lot of, you could probably find connections between any X-Files episode with another, but this one in particular seemed really much like a greatest hits. We just got to play something to get to the next episode.
Thank you. That's exactly what I'm saying. Another term that came up immediately in my mind was by the numbers. It actually takes, to me, quite a while before the first scene or action of real interest comes up. Just sort of coasts along. It's unfortunate because almost all the characters in it are stereotypes. It almost surprised me that here we are in roughly mid-sixth season and that they were just throwing something out there and expecting that people would, just take it because they'd been watching the show all along. I guess definitely no chances were taken with this episode. And for me, I think really the only thing that really it has to speak of is Darren McGavin. And like Travelers, that's not a whole lot here.
I'll probably come to the episode's defense a little bit more. I do find the character stereotypes and some of the humor grating and much too broad. That doesn't work. But the things that I do really appreciate about this episode is I love the atmosphere. I think the effects are generally really good, and there's some good music in here, but especially the atmosphere. I think the production team and Bowman does an exceptional job making you feel like you're in a hurricane for a lot of it. I mean, the rain does not stop. It's a different atmosphere from any other X-Files episode, really. It feels like that hot deluge pouring down, and the sets also, I think, work really well. So it's an episode I wouldn't skip if I did a watch through just because I enjoy the atmosphere. And once you sit down and it's going to be a popcorn film kind of a style, like you said, filler, and don't get invested in the plot, there's some fun to be had if you can shut your brain off.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll totally agree with you about the atmosphere of this. I went into this one, and me personally, I'm, for the most part, afraid of the water, and I'm not really fond of enclosed spaces either. I'm thinking, refreshing my memory about this one a little bit before I started, I thought, this is probably going to be pretty creepy for someone like me. I don't know how to swim. Being attacked by water, should be quite a nightmare for me. And I think I wasn't really creeped out, but there was a few moments of being grossed out, which kind of par for the course with X-Files. At some point you're going to get some kind of, gross outs. But I think another thing that surprised me is how by the numbers our two heroes are in this, especially Deana, that after all this time, we're mid-sixth season, and that she still is as adamant about her disbelief in this after she's seen and experienced how much stuff by this point, and that she's just literally like practically reading from the character Bible for this one.
That aspect, and we can get to it in the specifics later, I think is potentially to blame with the goal of giving Dales an arc to go from a skepticism about Scully to at the end, accepting and praising her. And so it forces her into that box, which I don't think was necessary to do, but I think that was the reason it was overly fronted in the script, her skepticism here. Although I just recently watched Alpha, which is a similar kind of middle-of-the-road rehash of other earlier X-Files stuff like Shapes, and her skepticism in that is really amped up also. These mid-season throwback episodes kind of have that flavor to it. So let's jump into actually going through the episode right now. Okay, so our cold open starts us with a little crawl here mentioning that we're in Goodland, Florida. And with 1013 stuff, I like to check and see if this is a real place. According to Google Maps, it's like an unincorporated residential place. There's 267 people live there in 2010. It's on the southwest coast of Florida. That works.
That's a nice touch that it's either real or semi-real.
Yeah, sometimes they'll change the names a little bit and get you close to where it's going to be. But I kind of enjoy it when they actually set it in a real space, but no pressure. So in our cold open, I'd consider it to be, for an X-Files cold open, fairly gruesome in the sense that we see off screen a mother and child getting killed. And at this point, we think potentially even the cat. The actor playing the mother, I think here has a very thankless job. I think that cold open, in my opinion, it's not bad, but I think it goes on too long and it makes a few assumptions. And by it going on too long, it asks a lot of the actor there to just keep the energy up at 11, if not 12, the entire time. And it becomes a little grating, but that's not her fault. I think she's doing a really good job with what she's been given. And then the other only issue is at this point, and I don't think the script really explains it, I was going to get your take, that I don't think they know that they need water, and that the idea that water would kill something that is essentially water, even though it's sort of salt water, that whole thing really at the end, I still didn't quite think it landed. And right here at this point, I don't know how they would know during a storm when their husband and father just was killed that they're running around the house. We need water. We need water. That's what we're going to use to resolve the situation. It seems a little bit too much to foreshadow and to ask. That's when it went on so long. What was your take on the cold open?
I was just a little confused about the whole thing. I remember asking myself, why again are they trying to tip the washing machine over? What I liked was, and because it was creepy and because of my own phobias or whatever, is when she asks her son to crawl back behind the washing machine. He's pretty good about it. Me, if I was in that situation and there was a hurricane outside and everything else that's going on, and if my mother said, crawl back behind the washing machine, I don't think I would have done it.
Especially in Florida during a hurricane, who knows what creatures have crawled back there.
Exactly.
After our cold open, we then come back from the credits and we're introduced for the first time in this episode to Arthur Dales, played by Darren McGavin, who is, of course, has left Mulder an answer machine message, and they come down to visit him. And I would say one of the good lines, there's a lot of one-liners in the episode I'm not sure that work fully, but I do like the one briefly where Mulder mentions that Scully has a knack of getting to the bottom of things, and then Scully responds, it seems so does Mr. Dales.
Well, she's looking at the empty booze bottles in the trash, sure.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's very forward of her. She just met this guy, right? and that's a hell of an insult, to throw out like that.
Again, I just finished watching Alpha, and I think there's another trend in that where Scully is really belligerent and biting to anybody that is an associate of Mulder's. And I think this probably goes back in the sense of anybody Mulder would trust or listen to, like Max Fennick or something, she's going to be skeptical towards. But it is, I think by season 6, she's kind of lost patience in that degree. Yeah. Or maybe they're just sticking with the original Bible, like you talked about. So we learn here that the victims are marine biologists, and that's how they knew that this was a special entity. Mm-hmm. And overall, how do you feel about the reintroduction of Arthur Dales and the interaction, building on what you already mentioned? And
he's not in this very much, roughly about as much as he is in Travelers. But I actually liked McGavin better in this one. It's always a little hard for me to watch him at the age that he is here. You want to think of him more as Kolchak and that age. And it made me wonder when he's hobbling around with the cane and everything, like how decrepit McGavin actually was at that point. It made me wonder, if he himself was walking with a cane. Later on, at the end of the episode, he's walking around without it, but he's still kind of hobbling running around. You know what? He seems livelier in this one, maybe investing a little bit more of himself into it. And again, I came away with it, thinking that I just liked his performance better, I guess, in this than in Travelers.
And, of course, he gets a chance to interact with somebody other than just Mulder. So we get a little bit of Scully to...
Yes. And you know what? You're absolutely right about his, albeit very small, arc in here as far as, she is concerned. That is nice. I would almost want to see more interaction between him and Deana.
Well, they do get the radio broadcast later. That's an indirect interaction, but we shall get to that. So soon after they visit Dale's, they go to the victim's house, and they're exploring, and Mulder does the classic touching some horrifying subject without any gloves.
Wait, it's funny. It's almost verbatim from Ghostbusters. When Bill Murray gets the ectoplasm. I mean, I guess everybody does that, kind of whips their hand, or if you got something on it. But it's so funny because I'm a huge Ghostbusters fan, and it just struck me.
Yeah, it's one of those aspects in which the X-Files is strangely unrealistic. Who knows what if that stuff would be venomous or anything else? But it's a minor thing that is just part of the character. Right. You gotta love it. Now, the real question here is, how do you think the cat got into the washing machine?
Good question.
It's not my question. Scully even asks this question. We don't get an answer, but all three of us are asking this.
I suppose it was open why the cat jumped in it, but then again, cats seem to really love enclosed spaces. And then I could see that it jumped, somehow got into the washing machine, and then the lid closed on it. Maybe it brushed the lid with its tail and slammed shut on the cat. It was me shaking my head like that they pulled out the old cliche of what is this? Is this a creature or something? And it's the cat. I mean, I'm literally sitting there going, Mulder gets whatever it is he's going to lift the lid up with, and I'm going, it's the cat. It's the cat. And guess what? It's the cat.
And to be clear, I actually don't have an issue with the cat getting in the washing machine. I just think it points to the real arc of the story, which is that the cat is incredibly and supernaturally intelligent. And when we get to the end of the episode, there's some clues to that. So I think the cat figured this out way ahead of everybody. Yeah. And got in there for its own safety.
It's a very interesting looking cat, too.
They really did a good job on the casting call.
Yeah. I don't like cats, but I was actually a little bit enraptured with that cat.
How can you not like cats?
And it's I'm sorry. I don't own a dog or a cat, but if I did, I'm a dog person. But yeah, I don't like cats, and cats don't like me.
Well, that's unfortunate. Yeah. Just to be clear, I think it's one of those things a lot of dog people, quote unquote, are also cat people and vice versa. So no big deal. No attacks. We're all friends here. But I say you haven't met the right cats. And just,
I would have liked to have met this cat because, again, I thought it was a very interesting looking cat. It had a very attractive face and an intelligent face, too.
And it didn't mind being wet, which... What an actor.
No, yeah, right. Absolutely.
So we're now introduced to Deputy Greer, who is, have to mention, played by the actor who now plays Detective Scully on the TV show Brooklyn Nine-Nine. How much?
His name is Scully, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Although I don't know if there's an actual connection between those two, or if it's just named after the same person that Scully was named after.
But come on, he's a total stereotype. Small town Southern police officer, heavy set, comes blustering in, stakes our heroes for bad guys. I was kind of laughing at that stereotype.
And I should know, the actor is Joel McKinnon Miller, just to be all fair. Yeah, but this whole episode is loaded with stereotypes and incompetent characters.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is just to get you warmed up.
It's one of those ones where it depends upon everybody being inept. There's some stories in movies and television and books where the plot depends on everybody being a jerk. Well, in this one, it's pretty much, it depends on everybody being inept.
And it's odd considering how many of them survive being so inept. So,
good point.
At this point, we get another line I enjoy from the episode, so I have to shine the light on these highlights here. So Mulder grabs his gun, and the deputy gets scared and says, "Now are you going to kill me?" And Mulder says, "No, but I'd like to."
That could be my favorite line from this episode. Duchovny does a good job with the delivery on that.
Okay, now back to Arthur Dales. It's mentioned that he discovered the X-Files 40 years ago, and the question here goes back to our last podcast about travelers, and that Dales gets the credit. And again, maybe this is correct for the X-Files for interpreting history wrong, but he didn't really discover the X-Files, or maybe he sort of discovered them, but they were more discovered / created by Dorothy. There you go. What does that tell you about how little culture's changed?
Yeah. Yeah. What's the saying about who writes history?
The victors?
That's correct. So Dale is the male victor here, and in a time when, a woman would have taken a far back seat. And right, I mean, Mulder wouldn't know, right? He's getting the information from Dales. He may not know anything about Dorothy.
It just goes to show that the whole Dorothy arc is one that needs to be explored more during the reboot, whenever that happens.
If you remember, I had said that if I ever got to write another X-Files story, that I wanted to write The Adventures of Dorothy.
I do remember, and I'm going to hold you to it.
Believe me, that's what I want to do. I'm still on that a year later.
They keep cutting to the back washing drain, both by the deputy watching it and Mulder and everybody else.
Yeah.
And I find it odd that there's so much fear of this when they don't really know. It's in the middle of a hurricane. There's a lot of other things that could take one's interest, including the blobs of goo and the disappearing people. But the drain seems to be a big focus of our characters. Am I missing something?
As far as what?
Why someone would be so interested in a backwashing drain?
Oh, in the middle of a hurricane? I'm not really.
I've been in a few floods and some intense storms. I've seen similar things, and it hasn't been like a premonition or a sign of a monster coming. So I wasn't sure if maybe I missed a detail here. I rewatched it, but I couldn't figure it out.
You'd have to go along with Deana here, like why anybody would think something, it's a hurricane. Of course there's going to be missing people. Of course there's going to be backwashes and maybe structures caving in from the pressure and the water and everything else. So, I don't get it.
Well, here's another sign of the cat's intelligence, where we eventually learn that the cat hid on the deputy's car and fled the dangerous house. Smart. And Deputy Greer has gone to which will eventually be the final major set of this episode, which is the condominiums, and stumbles across the corpse in the bathroom. I thought the effects were great. It looked very alien-esque, and it's simple, but I think it worked well. And going back with the rest of the production, the rain and the wind, the lighting too, it's a really excellent produced piece, and the atmosphere, I think, is phenomenal. I'm going to go out there and say, just taking on the atmosphere for this episode, I'm going to give it an 8 or a 9 just based on that. And the filming of Greer's death is exceptionally well lit. I really like the contrast. I like the angle. I like the energy of it all. What was your take on this whole scene, the exploration of the condo, the corpse, and the death scene?
Well, just to jump back for a moment, I do want to say something that I did really appreciate is that Greer had Car 54.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that our David, what's his name? Ammon? I'm hoping that was on purpose because one of my favorite comedy sitcoms is Car 54, Where Are You?
I believe it is, and judging by the rest of the broad humor, it had to have been.
Yeah, and you know what? That's funny. You talk about atmosphere. You'd have to ask yourself, is the very broad, almost slapsticky or dumb humor a good contrast to the otherwise creepy atmosphere? Or is it totally out of place? I kept going kind of back and forth with, oh, there's another one-liner groaner. And in some ways, I guess it's supposed to be kind of comedy relief, which in modern film and television, I'm not so sure that such a thing as comedy relief is actually necessary anymore. But it was really, pumping it in this. But to get to the whole thing, I really did like the setting of the condominium. And I'm glad that we got out of a smaller house setting and took it into something like that. And what it reminded me of is things like Rosemary's Baby, where a very old style of horror was brought into the modern era and put into a modern setting, an apartment building in New York City. So I kept thinking about that there's a monster loose, can't get out of the building, we can't get out of this place thing. But of all things, it's set in a condominium in Florida. That was interesting. But yeah, I totally agree with liking the setting, liking the way it was presented. What I just didn't like was the characters that inhabit the setting.
Yeah, and to go back to your question, something I thought about a lot while watching it again, comedy versus the horror aspect. You could go look at previous or even later episodes and find analogs of things that may not have worked as well or may have worked. So something like Ice or Darkness Falls, which have similar premises, are played really fairly straight. Maybe a few very minor jokes, but otherwise just kind of amp up on the horror. And they're very successful. But then you also have stuff like Firewalker, which is also very, for the most part, played very straight and is very boring and drab. And so the premise is so out there and not explored enough on the horror angle to really grab me the way it currently is.
Yeah.
So I am okay with the idea of comedy being interjected, but I don't think it's the right type of comedy, and I don't think it's enough comedy.
Yeah,
Either go all the way in and ramp it up, something like The Rain King did, or if you're going to go genre like that, go all the way. And that's one of the reasons I actually like The Rain King, even though it has its issues, is that it at least knows what it wants to be for the most part, and it goes all in. There's the talk, which has been kind of a thread throughout this season 6 coverage of the X-Cast, that is the received fan wisdom that season 6 is X-Files light. And I think it's an example sometimes of what I think people are talking about. Something like Dreamland also, where they mix a lot of tones. It leans really heavy into very gentle, not gentle in the sense of unoffensive, because some of the humor in this is offensive, but gentle in the sense of very safe, predictable sitcom-y humor.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I don't know, even some of Carter's stuff, which I know people can be milquetoast about, but let's say like The Ghost That Stole Christmas, I still think there's a more distinct theatrical in the sense of play style, dialogue-based wit, or you've got the classic Darren Morgan stuff, which I don't think everybody can ape and copy. But there are different ways the X-Files have done it. And in the sense of X-Files light, I think it's more when it's a problem is when it waters it down to become too much like other television shows at the time. It's too safe. It's too predictable. And that's what I think the comedy did here. Yeah. And so at that end, if you're going to be in season 6 and you're going to be in that mode of humor, I would have rather ramped this up and make it very dark and make it, I mean, even like something like Dode Calm, I think if you would have made that a comedy, it would have just made it worse. And that's an episode I think it's got a lot of quirks and flaws to, but I at least can enjoy it because it commits to the mood and it goes with it. For this one is I can't really enjoy anything in the plot because it's not taking itself seriously on any front except for the comedy, and the comedy is not something that is to my liking, and I doubt it's to the liking of most X-Files fans. And not in the sense that people won't find it funny, but it's not what I think X-Files fans expect in the form of humor.
I agree. They're taking a chance with the humor in this one because they're basically suggesting that you don't take what's going on seriously. And in a show like this, do you want to? To me, it's a risk. And I'm looking at it as a writer, that you don't want to have everybody just sort of tune out or focus so much on the dumb one-liners that you're not taking the rest of it seriously. And then also, that's really interesting about calling it X-Files Light. I keep thinking of the word coasting. Like, is the show just coasting here at this moment? Let me ask you this, because I'm not really sure. At this point, what was Chris Carter's involvement level like? Is he still fully there, or had he stepped back at all at this point?
So in season 6, they made the jump from Vancouver to LA. So you have two things. You have a change in tone simply by the weather, but you also have a change in tone based on the actor pool that's available. So that's something quite a few of the other guests and hosts, the X-Casts have mentioned. For example, Chris Knowles has mentioned that a lot about the hindrance of changing from the Vancouver pool to the more go-get-'em energy of the Hollywood crew. So 1998 to then spring of 1999 is when season 6 happens. This also comes right off the tail of the film. And then at the same time, Carter is going back to Millennium to try to help shepherd it again, because he sort of disappeared from Millennium season 2.
Okay.
So he was really overworked. He had just started Millennium, 2 seasons ago. And then there's Millennium season 2 here, and then the film and this. And also this is after the Apex, after, again, Fight the Future was released. And X-Files was now waning, but was still this huge pop culture phenomenon. So I think it's more of an attempt to just appeal to the mass general audience that it had created. Also with the fact that there's a lot of other things happening in season 6, and so there's more effort potentially being put into some of these other episodes. So right before this, they just did a 2-parter mythology episode, 2 fathers and 1 son. The next episode, Monday, is the more conceptual time loop, Groundhog's Day thing. They're trying a lot of different experimental things. So you had also Triangle earlier in the season, which was Carter's attempt to kind of ape rope and do as many continuous shots.
Yeah.
And then How the Ghost Stole Christmas, which was experimental. Up next, also, we have Alpha, which is generic like this, and Trevor. But then you've got The Unnatural and Field Trip and Biogenesis. So I think it's unfair to necessarily call it X-Files Light, and that you do have some dark stuff and a lot of risk-taking. The problem with this is, which we keep hammering on, is that it's not taking risks. And I see the value of going back to the traditional X-Files aesthetic, like they tried to do in Alpha, to try to anchor the season to not be too comedic and too soft.
Yeah.
But here, I think they passed the opportunity, and in my opinion, would have worked much better if you would have thrown out. Why not just throw out all the comedy? I mean, really. I mean, you could have a few quips like you normally do in an X-Files, but we don't need the goofy characters.
No. I would almost think that this episode might have been intended to bring in new viewers as far as it's textbook Mulder and Scully, and it's not connected to the mythology. It's almost like, oh, yeah, there's that X-Files show, but it's so deep into it now, I couldn't even, there's no way to get into it, or it's too complicated or anything like that. And I could see almost somebody saying, well, just here, watch this one. This would be a good entry level one. Also, what I'm thinking of is, and the reason I asked that about Carter's involvement is, there's how many different cases in classic television where the creator, the spearhead of a show steps back and then everything kind of goes to hell in a handbasket. Star Trek is a really good example. Gene Roddenberry steps back in 3rd season, is considered to be the least favorite of most Star Trek fans. David Lynch stepped away from Twin Peaks, and it just sort of, I don't know what the hell happened to, to that show until he came back. It's just sort of, I don't know, ground itself. Okay, I just wanted to shore up why I was saying that about Carter and what was going on at this point.
My hunch, just also based on the writer, is I just think they were in a pinch and they needed somebody just to fill it in. Some of the other episodes are so intensive labor-wise.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that I was reading about how there were a lot of drafts of this. Who knows what happened to the script over the time that it was being written, and if there were other fingers in it that might have dulled it down. I kind of actually liked the original concept, was that there was supposed to be a monster in a gold mine.
It could be if they play it right, or I'm worried they might have thought that was too close to Fire Walker.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be different if they did it right, but...
Yeah, it said that Spotnitz was the one that said that he wasn't interested in the mine theme, but he liked a monster in an enclosed space, which I agree. I mean that's in general any monster story. It's not that scary if you're out on a football field or any field out somewhere, you can see it coming at you, obviously. Very, very interesting. I always am looking at these things from a writer's standpoint and what can happen over the course of many drafts.
Yeah, maybe another person has read some of the earlier scripts and they can share their knowledge in the X-Files basement. It'd be fun to learn. Please do if you know. So at this point, we then cut back to Mulder and Scully driving in the rain, and here's another line that kind of counts to what you were talking about earlier about where Scully's at as a character. Mulder says, think of this as a test of our mettle, and Scully says, I don't need my mettle tested. And she's correct. That reinforces the point that some of the skepticism at this point is a little unwarranted, but it's a genre show. They need to reset it. You just got to roll with it. Yeah. Honestly, it doesn't bother me. There's only one thing, and that's coming up in a little bit, that bothers me with Scully's interaction with Dales. But overall, we have some more driving in the rain. I think it's nice and atmospheric. And they come to the condos and they find Greer there and see the markings on the neck. And again, I think the makeup in this episode, all these practical effects are excellent. Any comments on everything that leads up to that?
No, although I was kind of laughing when they're driving in the car, because it's like, how the hell is he driving at all? We the viewers can't see a damn thing.
And then when it cuts to the car outside, it doesn't look like it's raining that bad, but I don't care. I just like the atmosphere, and I'm going to keep repeating that. I don't care. I'm buying into the fantasy. They're in a hurricane, and somehow they're making it through.
No, I'm saying, the hurricane is convincing enough. Like, how is he even driving at all, through all that?
See, that's the kind of logic stuff I'll give it a pass on. There's just some magic GPS that who knows the FBI has a hold of back then. I think also a radar detector for fallen branches and flying squids. So this is the part that bothers me here, and that Scully gets on the radio and mentions that Deputy Greer has been attacked by something unidentified, and it cuts to Dale's listening, and he says, unidentified my ass. Thinking, Dale's, no one knows what it is.
Right.
At least, did I miss something? I think this was just written in there to be like, I don't trust Scully. It was really awkward and doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't ruin anything, but I find it a weak spot of that entire attempt of an arc.
It may have just been to give him a line that kind of sits up and that he's kind of a hard ass or whatever. But yeah, I agree. There'd be no way that he would know. Like, what the hell is he talking about?
They just could have been a different word, and then he could have said that, it was like a squid, a common jellyfish attack or something, and then you could say jellyfish my ass. Something like that. You just shifted into something mundane, and he could say it. But instead, unidentified. That's the entire point of the episode, folks. Yeah. So
you should have written this episode.
I don't know about that. We have many, many much more competent, talented writers, such as yourself and many others that listen to and participate on the Xcast. I am good at criticizing the hard work of others. But
we all have our places. We all must play our roles, right?
Shame on me. So now we're going to be introduced to some of the other characters. We have Walter and then Angela, who is pregnant. And then we've got the militia member, which I can't remember his name. I'll look it up. But he's played by Jeremy Roberts. I recognized him from Millennium's Thin White Line, in which he was fabulous. An incredible guest performance, I thought. Here, he's just kind of, it's strange to see him being so bland. And then we have the thief. So that's our cast of characters.
You mean our cast of stereotypes, our parade of stereotypes? You've got the henpecked husband, right? You've got the loudmouth, irritable Hispanic woman with the horrible Hispanic accent, like stereotypical accent, and she's pregnant to boot. The thief, the survivalist, conspiracy theory loving guy who holes up in his apartment and won't budge because he's got it lined with guns and American flags on the wall. Love that touch.
A lot of the stuff that doesn't really make sense, that could be blamed on the rewrites or whatever.
Yeah.
Fine. But this is some of the points where it just, it really.
You know what it is? It's almost as if this is the very first script from a new writer. And what they do is that's what they do. They hit all stereotypes in everything from characters to beats of the story. But we know that he was not a new writer at this point. Here's the funny thing is, if he delivered this and it didn't end up like this because people on staff were sticking their fingers into it, why did they accept the script and then film it too? Unless they literally just didn't really care much at this point because it needed to fill a slot.
Yeah, they just don't have the time. It's just crazy to imagine making 22 episodes of this in a year is just outrageous. So It's understandable when something like this slips through, but I just wish there were times where creators would take a risk. Think of something like Detour or Quagmire, where they so easily could have gone to a moment like this in the third act, and instead they just, you know what, let's just turn it into a character piece. Let's just put one or two characters, even if it's just Mulder and Scully, and have them talk. Yeah. And make it that's all we need. We've already had enough action. We don't need to do this. And so as opposed to spending time putting things in and finish up the episode, just take stuff out. And let the people breathe and just write some interesting dialogue and call it good. Maybe that's too much to be said, but the fact that they go to the giving birth in a storm trope at the same time Mulder is dying, what are they expecting from us? And to take it seriously with all the humor is just so much to ask. I think a way that you can enjoy the episode, though, is because they did amp up that cartoonishness to 11. Just to say, the gall, the audacity to actually write and script something that is so stereotypical. I'm not going to say borderline. It's offensive in a lot of ways, and then just boring.
She is. I'll go so far as to say it. Angela is. Listen, I'm not Hispanic, but she was fairly borderline offensive with the way she was presented. I actually was interested, and I said this at the beginning, that it took a while for something to come up to really make me kind of sit up and start to take notice a little bit more. I think it would have been more interesting to have it focused on when they find Greer and use that as the central point. What is going on with Greer? It was interesting that she had to do the tracheotomy on him. It was interesting when they had to put him in the bathtub because, they start turning the water on and then they keep focusing on the drain. And you're thinking, oh my God, this guy's in the worst shape possible. And we know that this thing is coming through drains and other sort of, orifices or whatever. And they're putting him in the bathtub. If they had focused on that with our two heroes and not had the peanut gallery kind of arrayed around them, making too much static and noise, it could have been a much more interesting character piece about Mulder and Scully and trying to figure out what the hell's going on with Greer.
I think we would have also had more time with Greer and had him kind of resuscitate and be a little conscious. You could redeem the bumpkin stereotype a little bit and explore his character and play with that. there's stuff there. There's enough stuff just with Greer and that stereotype in them to get comedy and also pathos and character development and solve the mystery. Because none of the other characters contribute to the plot.
No.
I mean, you say Walter shoots the thing, but Scully could have shot the thing if they didn't have to be giving birth in the first place.
Absolutely correct. Now, I did like that. I did actually like when Walter has to shoot. But other than that, yeah, you're right. And I didn't care much for Greer disappearing as like literally bodily, like totally gone. And when Mulder reaches down and holds up his clothes is again another kind of comedy beat there.
And it's a callback to the shirt found in the drain earlier. Yeah. And the question is, how did the shirt get into the drain?
Yep.
I mean, these sorts of things where let's explore this a little bit more, and not necessarily that everything has to be explained, or you could just make it crazier and more mysterious. But the fact that they're trying to explain things, then they just make it more confusing. So again, talk me through this, Jim. The creatures are water. But it's like a seawater, and somehow they can constitute a different level of mass somehow, because water can't usually become autonomous and strangle people. And I know it's a science fiction show, but somehow if you reduce the salinity, even though it's raining, and it's raining in the ocean, so obviously you'd have to be very far down in the ocean where the salinity is more constant. Okay, sure. I mean, I can work these things out a little bit as the viewer, but give me a little bit of help that simply Mulder, all he has to do to survive is go out into the rain. You just have to be touched by some water, and that difference of salinity is enough to cause this thing to die, and somehow it can survive in Florida humidity.
I'm getting some deja vu here. Didn't we have a similar sort of conversation about the creature in Traveler?
Yeah, and this is probably so boring for the listeners, and I apologize. But it just goes to, I wish they would have spent a little bit more time. Just give me something. In the end, they're parasitic. They latch in, and then it seems like they can grow out. There's like use you as a host, like again, going back to the host and or ice or alien or
where does every bit of the human victims go?
They turn into water.
They completely turn into water. Everything, organs, bones, skin.
Yeah, quite quickly.
Everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're in cartoonish sci-fi territory, which is fine.
Yeah.
But they try to explain it, and then the explanations just make me more confused. And this is where the mention of like David Lynch comes in, to where just lean into it. Just go crazier then. Same thing with the comedy. Go crazier with the comedy or don't. It's just too milquetoast.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen like dozens of tentacles just exploding up out of a drain and attacking all of them all at once, and then them trying to free themselves, So I got to tell you, some of these other characters were the ones that needed to be disintegrated and not necessarily Greer.
Even the introduction of the militia survivalist person, why is he in the story? To give the gun to Walter? None of this is necessary. I mean, the only one who has any sort of remote personality and kind of fits the tone is the thief, and that has the purpose of stealing the car. But here's a question for you. Did I miss this? He stole the deputy's car, correct? The thief?
When he disappears?
Yeah, so they can't leave and Mulder's upset.
Yes.
Where is Mulder and Scully's car? Did it get crushed by a tree off screen? I mean, that's how they got there.
Wait a minute. No, hold on a second. Or does he take their car? Wait a minute.
He can't take two cars.
No, that's right. Boy.
He takes the deputy's car because the deputy pulled into that carport.
Right.
So where is Mulder and Scully's car? And so it's, again, a minor plot thing, but if they wanted to escape, they could fit in that car. It's only 5 of them or whatever.
Yeah, actually, that's not a small plot point. That's actually pretty big. Boy, and it's funny, that didn't occur to me. Good job. I don't know.
It didn't ruin it for me, but I was just, again, too many things going on.
I guess I was just so glad to have that character gone. One more annoying character gone.
And that would have been pretty fun for this episode if they just introduced all these characters and immediately offed them.
Yeah.
Do something radical with it to where
10 little Indians. I mean, if you're going to go cliche, go, like you keep saying, go for it.
But do it all within 60 seconds.
I guess that's what I was thinking was going to happen, was that these characters are going to get bumped off one by one. And you know what? While I'm thinking about it, if I may say it, you were talking about special effects in this one. It really falls down when the baby is born. That's one of the worst artificial prop newborn babies ever.
It didn't bother me because this is one of the things, I don't know if it was intentional. If it was, bless the editor and everybody else. But when the baby is born, immediately, so the baby comes out and then immediately cuts to the Jeremy Roberts, the militia person, being strangled by the tentacle. But his face and the angle and the way it cuts, it looks like he is the baby being strangled by like an umbilical cord or something, and then it cuts back to the baby. So it works really well. And it had to be, the editor had to think, this is perfect. I'm going to save this episode, because it's that just surreal and quite disturbing cut. Well, if you look at it that way and kind of just go into a trance and watch that scene, I think it'll increase the value of the episode for you.
Listen, they should have had that. The more I'm thinking about this, it's already, they're ramping things up. The baby's trying to be born at the same time that the thing is coming through the light fixture. And actually, George, number one, he takes way too long of looking up at that light fixture and not saying something. Wouldn't it have been interesting if the baby did come out and it did have the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck, which sometimes happens, and then you had the juxtaposition between George being strangled by the tentacle, but Deana has to deal with the umbilical cord around the baby. I don't know. Maybe I'm just trying to create too much more chaos in this episode, but it might have been interesting. I was prompted to think that by what you were saying about the cut to him, and that you were thinking that it was the baby.
I was thinking just go a little more Eraserhead, but we can go your direction, which is just let's go bonkers. That happens, and then gigantic nest of tentacles shoots out from the basement, and they have to start using fire axes to, just let's go cartoonish at this point. Let's ramp it up.
More fire axes would have helped this episode.
Let's maybe talk about it briefly. Mulder gets attacked and then is kind of crawling towards the door and sees Reggie, the wonderful cat, Reggie, who is out there acting his heart out. And it's beautiful. Yes. But it looks to me, and again, this is why I think the cat has some incredible intelligence. It seems like the cat is motioning to Mulder, like, come on outside. The rain is the secret. And they make the eye contact. And that's the level of bonkers that I wish this episode went to, where they really, instead of it, I can interpret it as a viewer, but they should have gone all in.
I think he motions because he's dripped on at that point or something.
Yes, but it's an animal actor, so you've got to work with it.
Oh, poor cat, he didn't care to be doing this right now, but that's what it was. But yeah, that's an interesting take. Yeah,
I know the cat didn't really, but I'm just saying it's like when they put peanut butter in the mouth of a horse or something. I think the cat made that motion. Mulder looks at it, goes, it would have made this episode potentially a 10.
Yeah, it could have been Jose Chung's Cat from Outer Space.
Boy, that's a throwback. I used to love that film.
There you go. What a mashup.
And then the only other thing that I wanted to talk about is the horrible ending. Anyone for water or line. No. Wow. I mean, that just pretty much tells you, this humor attempt has been intentional the entire time.
Yeah. And you know what? And I could go on like I did with Travelers about, you have Darren McGavin, you had trouble getting him in the first place. You have Darren McGavin again, and then this is what you do. You give him this episode. But he does kind of elevate things, when he's in something.
He had some warmth charm to the episode.
Yeah.
That's not stereotype based. It doesn't make you cringe.
And I do like his commentary on the Mulder and Scully relationship. I do very much like what he said about if he had someone like that, which now that I think about it, it's like, well, he had Dorothy, right? What is he talking about? But anyways.
Exactly.
What he means is more of a partner too, because if I had to write a Dorothy adventure, she would be an equal partner in the whole thing. He's just a chauvinist, that's all.
Yeah. Come on, Kolchak, step up your game here.
I know, really. I'm trying not to think about, the sadness of, so they get him a third time, and then the poor guy has a heart attack, and they have to get rid of his scenes.
Any final thoughts before we head over to the mailbag?
No, I think that's pretty much. It would just be harping on things that we've already covered. So not bad or not terrible, but definitely not one that you're going to walk away and hold it up as the best of the X-Files. But you know what? Again, if you edited out some of the stupid one-liners and maybe tone down the stereotype of some of the characters, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad one to have someone who has never watched X-Files sit down and watch, because you're getting textbook examples of our main characters, classic Monster of the Week action, some grossness, some dubious creature science, and that atmosphere that we keep talking about, which, maybe the atmosphere was the star or the real star of this episode. There you go.
Fabulous. So let's go to the mailbag. We got a lot of comments. I was not expecting this. It's been pretty great lately. We've been getting a lot more active commenters here in the basement. So starting off, I'm going to try to get through everybody as quick as I can. I may skip a few here. So Chris Knowles, garbage but moderately amusing. I think there's some commonalities there. Charnette Scott, not that it's a particularly important thought, but I always felt bad for the cat. So I think there's some agreement. Well, the cat's so intelligent in knowing what's going on. Like, it's the only competent character in the entire episode. I don't feel too bad more in the sense that I respect it.
Okay.
Tony Black here mentions that I've always felt sorry for the placement of this. How do you follow Two Fathers, One Son? In a way, it's too jarring to shift back into standalone territory with the status quo resumed. I feel like an episode such as Alpha, much more of a traditional procedural, would have worked better. I think that's a good point. Anyway, this is okay. Nothing particularly special about it, though it's such a waste of Arthur Dale's. You could have had an infinite amount more interesting stories to bring him in for after Travelers.
Yeah. But you know what? Darren McGavin doesn't, I know he's older here and unfortunately not too far off from his own, demise, but you wouldn't have to have an Arthur Dale's episode where he's maybe running around, with a gun in his hand or anything like that at all. But you know what? At least keep checking in with him throughout the episode. Have him be the touchstone that Mulder keeps, going back to him and saying, well, what about this and what about that? And that he offers some particularly great wisdom or information or something. But just to have him be this sort of bookend thing, it's not any sort of tribute to supposedly what Kolchak supplied for this show.
Yeah, it would have been fun to actually have him in on a Kolchak-inspired urban journalist-based horror. Like maybe it's something like Folie à Deux and have him in on that would have been fabulous.
That's interesting.
Tony's thread, or his comment, inspired a very long thread that I'd recommend everybody check out. I'm just going to hit a few of the comments in there. First of all, Chris Knowles mentions, good to see our boy Hance there again from the Thin White Line. So it's good to see support for that. And Andrew Levitt is responding to this here, saying production-wise, they were having trouble putting Arcadia together in the editing stage, which is why Agua Mala was brought forward. I like to think that its action-driven nature was also a good way to come off the bombastic episodes Two Fathers, One Son, going into a very average procedural like Alpha would have made that episode look even worse than it was. Kind of like what happened to Travelers for some people after the huge Patient X and the Red and the Black. There's a lot of good discussion in there.
I agree that a show can treat an episode badly by where it's placed, but that's kind of almost making excuses for the writing in this episode, by saying, oh, it didn't get a fair shake. It doesn't get a fair shake because it's, sandwiched in between this, that, and the other thing. I don't know.
I think there's 2 points being made. I think that is one argument. The other one is that is just energy and budget. Mythology episodes take so much labor and energy that it has to come from somewhere. Yeah. And it's going to come from things like this.
Yeah.
Michael Little says, it's really, really stupid, but I always enjoy watching it. Bowman does a great job. X-Files as a Michael Bay movie. And just as a note, I've actually seen Michael Little stand up for Agua Mala quite a few times in a similar, in a very balanced, he admits its quirks and enjoys it. So I'm going to give him a shout out as I'm going to thank the X-Cast's resident defender of Agua Mala, and I salute you.
I do too, for just saying that something is stupid, but that you still love it. Because I was watching Godzilla movies last night on Comet, so I have no business, trying to act all, high and mighty about things, because I know things are stupid and I love them. So I support his love for stupidness.
Adam Silva, I like seeing Darren McGavin again, and it's fine enough. Guilty pleasure. Ronald Wilson, they could have just called it Florida Man, quote unquote, and spared us all the cringe. Outside McGavin and the Kitty, the guest cast was uninspiring. So there's a lot of commonalities, what we talked about. Andrew Levitt, a fun thriller that harkens back to bottle episodes like Ice, but puts its own unique twist on it. The pseudoscience behind the sea creature makes it believable enough to be a threat, and the tropical storm is a good reason to strand the agents. The episode does get too bogged down in the drama of the forgettable supporting cast, and most of the humor is cringeworthy, but Rob Bowman brings enough forward momentum to the episode that it's still an enjoyable watch. 7 out of 10. Seems to be a much bigger fan in the sense of finds the sea creature believable enough, I guess, to be a threat in that sense. So, hey, it's great to see somebody get even more out of it. It's fun to read these. There's a lot of defenders, and that's great.
I meant to say this at the beginning of this. I do like the trope of something is brought in by an event, like a natural event. A creature or something is driven into an area that it wouldn't necessarily normally go, and then things happen, and I do like that. I'm reading it, and I'm actually reading a novel right now that by Max Brooks called Devolution, which is the subtitle is something like an account of the Mount Rainier Sasquatch massacre, something like that. And it's that same idea that there's an eruption at Mount Rainier and it drives Bigfoot's big feet into an area so that they wouldn't normally be, and then they interact with humans and it all goes badly. So I do like that idea about a sea creature. I think Jaws is kind of like that too. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's driven in to the shore more so than it normally would have.
The common theme in a lot of the X-Files Monster of the Week is the encroachment. It's either driven in or it's due to humans' encroachment into nature. So something, again, like D2 or Darkness Falls or The Host to some degree. I guess that's more driven in. But yeah, it's a nice way to come up with why are we seeing this very rare cryptozoological creature in this context and make it a little bit more palatable, more grounded.
Yep.
Dan Gear says, I love it. That is all. Matt Allaire, well, it did have Arthur Dales again. The water creature didn't make a lot of sense, but oh well. So I'm glad that we're not alone on that point. Eleanor Butler, I like the way Scully gets credit for being a badass. She deserves all the credit. The episode is okay, but I think it's cute for the dynamic between Mulder and Scully. I like how the Storm becomes a fully fledged character too. That's something you mentioned there, Jim. And the disclaimer, it's been a while since I've seen it properly. Here we go. We got Gina Ferreri. The actual monster stuff I kind of like. The slithery jellyfish-looking tentacles are fun, but there's some cringy stereotype stuff that is definitely not aged well. And side note, isn't Epsom salt magnesium, not sodium? That would not work.
Wow. Okay, listen, that's a bit, if that's true, then that's a huge mistake. Forget about the car that disappears.
Yeah. Nice. Cy James, very dark and very wet, literally. Not a bad episode, but then again, it isn't the best either. The humor is good in places, and you can tell it is on the old side by looking at that TV that Dougie was trying to pinch. An okay Monster of the Week story for me, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. So overall, I think there's not a lot of people loathe or dislike the episode. I think so. Either people can take it as just dumb fun, or people actually just seem to enjoy the roller coaster ride of that. And hooray!
Yeah, that's my takeaway from here. I love the I like it and that's all, so shut up attitude. I support that attitude.
That wraps up the episode. But before we go, Jim, what have you been up to? Any fun projects to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I actually had as far as like writing and publishing goes in 2020, I actually had a few high points. I actually came back to writing. I actually had kind of almost stopped for almost 2 years because of this, that, and the other thing. And I brought my Sergeant Janice occult detective character over to my own little publishing house that I have called Flinch Books, and finally put out the third novel of the character, and then re-edited and had new covers made and republished the first 2 books. I also, and I'm really proud of this, I took my G.I. Joe Adventure Team fiction that I had once published under the Kindle Worlds platform on Amazon, and when that folded, all of us had all of our work returned to us, but we couldn't do anything with it because we didn't have the license for the characters. So I sat on my G.I. Joe fiction for a while, and finally last year I said, I am sick of not doing anything with this, and I basically changed all the names, all of the actionable litigiousness of the names of everything, and wrote a new story and published the 3 stories all together as instead of G.I. Joe and the Adventure Team, it's now DC Jones and Adventure Command International. And had a really fun cover made for it to make it look like a toy package from the 70s, and we have some interior illustrations to make it look like the old instruction sheets from the toys in the 70s. And then just the other day, it was actually also published as an audiobook, and I'm really proud of that too. And in between each of the stories, they made it sound like old TV commercials, the audio from TV commercials for the fictional DC Jones. So I'm having a good time. I'm currently and almost done. I have one more chapter and an epilogue. I'm writing an official Green Hornet novella that I don't know when it'll be published, but I'm almost done with that.
Good grief. It had been productive. Congratulations there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Is there a best route for folks to check out your stuff?
Literally go to Amazon to see my author page, because every single one of my books, except for one, and concerning this show, it's an important one. So, but first go to, it's amazon.com/author/Jim Beard, and you will see all of my books there and comics, everything that I've had published through other publishers or my own publishing house. But my Kolchak novella called The Last Temptation is on Moonstone Books site. So that's moonstonebooks.com. I know there's obviously going to be a lot of Kolchak fans out there in your audience. But if you go to Amazon, you'll see the X-Files anthology that I have a story in. And then let's see, on Facebook, you can find me at The Beard, the Jim Beard fan page. And then on Twitter, I'm at Writer Jim Beard, all one word.
Terrific. Well, thanks again for taking the time to join us and chat. And hopefully we'll be able to chat again soon in the near future. And if not, definitely keep in touch. Well, until next time, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Cerebral Jukebox.
Yeah, because we were talking about this. We've talked about the different covers there are. Now, you yourself, I thought I'd found a nice little sort of hidden gem here, because you yourself were in a band called Bleeder, or still are in a band called Bleeder.
Yeah.
And when I was looking on Spotify just for different covers of the song, I noticed there is a cover of this by a band called Bleeder. And I was like, oh, brilliant, this is what Niall's not told me, is that he's actually done a cover of it that got released.
Right in the childhood.
Would you like to guess what my favourite character was?
Oh, Foo Dog.
It was indeed.
Of course,
Foo Dog.
it's always Animal.
Played by Bender.
Played by Bender again. Another appearance by Bender in one of these shows. I think great sidekick, sort of, in a way. There was a nice joke as well that was like, oh, you're my dog. Oh, no, I mean that as in, like, in the hip-hop way, not like, I own you. And I was like, that's a nice little touch. For Avatar fans as well, the guy who voices Jake Long also voices one of the main characters in that, Fire Lord Zuko, which is really funny because he deals with fire in that, and he was a dragon in this. So I was like, oh, there's a lot of fire in his voicing career. He was also Rufio in, the film Hook.
Oh, okay.
Rufio! So him.
Podcast 616, a Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast.
I was gone for 5 years and now I'm just in a different reality. Whoa, what's happened there?
Luke's been blipped.
Yeah.
Luke's been blipped. Here he is. Luke's been blipped. He's back again.
So, Luke, it's been 5 years. I've got a few things to catch you up on.
Yeah.
What did he make to Loki season 6? Craig.
Well, what are we on? Spider-Man 8 now, are we? With Sony?
Yeah, but it's Miles Morales now, so that's all good.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network. The Xcast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the Xcast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.